Good evening, everybody. I'm Randy Holhut from the Commons, and tonight, in conjunction with BCTV, we present this forum for candidates for the Brattleboro Select Board. There are 3 candidates running for the 3-year seat on the board. Elizabeth McLoughlin, who currently holds a 1-year seat on the board, Rikki Risatti, a town meeting member from District 3, and the incumbent David Schoales. There are 5 candidates running for the 2 1-year seats on the board. Daims, a town meeting member and director of Brattleboro Common Sense, in Goodnow, who's currently clerking at Castello, Valenti, and Gentry in preparation for a legal career. Good luck. Oscar Heller, who ran last year as for the Select Board and is chair of the Town Energy Committee still. Okay. And the incumbent, Daniel Quipp, and Rikki Risatti, who is also running for the 1-year seat. Take your pick, or both. So here's the format for tonight's forum. Our panelists are Olga Peters.
I'm running for 2 seats.
Yes, the 3-year and the 2-year. I did say that. Okay. Our panelists tonight are Olga Peters, senior reporter at the Commons, Abby MNOOKIN from 350 Brattleboro, and Kate Anderson, who's the former chair of the Town Arts Committee. They'll each ask 1 question of the entire panel. Panelists will have 2 minutes to answer. And after that, we'll take questions from the audience. You'll get your chance to say. And then at the end, there'll be a 2-minute closing statement from each of the candidates. So we'll first begin with Abby, and you get the first question. Directed to the entire board.
Okay. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Climate change is not a future concern for other people to confront. It is here and now. It is an existential threat, and it is of great concern to many, and I dare say most, people in our community. And yet it doesn't affect all people equally. Instead, it disproportionately impacts marginalized communities, including people of color, poor people, as we saw all too well in Tropical Storm Irene and the mobile home communities, and our youth, who will bear a greater burden in the future. This is a global issue, and yet we have a moral responsibility to take local action. What concrete actions will you take on the Select Board? And this is in terms of planning, development, infrastructure, services such as transportation, to decrease our reliance on fossil fuels and build resilience here in Brattleboro.
And we'll begin with Rikki Risatti.
I like to go last because I like to hear everyone else's ideas and see what I have to offer that's different. But I'm pretty sure from when I've listened to their campaign so far concerning like that same issue is that none of them have brought up the idea of having our own municipal currency to fund advancing both sustainable technologies and reparations for people, because last I checked, the Federal Reparations Committee is a bunch of white people, and I think they all vote very Republican from last time I checked, so I really don't trust that there's going to be any progress in our lifetime with that system, which is part of why I'm also not seated in front of the American or state flag.
Ian?
Yeah. So I think the first step towards that was the sustainability coordinator, and I really supported that move by the Select Board in the town of Brattleboro. That will help us to coordinate and move forward in a direction that is sustainable for Brattleboro and sustainable for Vermont. It's a difficult question because it is global, but I think that there are some concrete things that we could do, like making the busing more accessible that takes us around Brattleboro, making bike lanes safer and pedestrian walkways safer, to encourage people not to drive in town and to get people using modes of transit that are more sustainable. And then I think also how we heat and the energy we use for our public buildings needs to change.
Elizabeth?
At the time the sustainability coordinator was being considered, I wanted to make sure that the energy audit that was performed for the town was enacted, and we had spent over $1 million on energy coordinating items. once the sustainability coordinator was voted in, I was on the selection committee, and I was happy to find such an excellent candidate. I'm looking forward to working with him. We've already discussed at the select board an initiative to have buses used not just for people who may not have automobiles, but people who want to use the buses for sustainability purposes as a climate change initiative. I also note that the housing and the planning, that we have made donations from the town budget for Red Clover Commons to get that item out of the floodway. And similarly, the planning department is working with Tri-Park to get any areas that are in the floodway out for that housing. And there are many housing initiatives that the select board is working on at the present time. So I just want to mention that the Energy Committee and the Sustainability Coordinator will be working on numerous items, including coordinating with CEON and other sustainability organizations in Brattleboro.
Kurt?
Hi, everybody. Please excuse me if I'm nervous. I wouldn't want to think that I come to the select board with an entire ironed out agenda for the climate. But I'm a member of Brattleboro Common Sense, which has promoted an emergency declaration here in town. And part of that is a provision for frequent monthly meetings at which people can promote their own ideas to the town, and under which the select board would then make emergency ordinances out of the suggestions of the people. We have heard since June of last year many individual proposals, and too many to list. But among them are hitchhiking, licensed hitchhiking as an alternative to driving. The idea being, if people share their transportation in a good camaraderie, it would develop a good way for people to know each other, share a ride, meet a friend, and it would also reduce the use of fossil fuels. Such a system is already, or has been in effect in Czechoslovakia, and it works great. With the use of cell phones, people could record their location and the identities of people involved and make it very safe. Also, we're surveying the people who live in the floodplains to find out what they want, and we hope to institute something according to the results of that survey.
David?
There are a lot of things we could do. I think one of the first things the town should do, the select board should do, is have a look at the state plan for Putney Road. Right now, there's a multi-year plan. It's a few years in the future, but a multi-year plan to put in a series of rotaries and to increase traffic flow. And it's been shown over and over and over again, particularly in concentrated areas, that when you increase traffic flow, you increase traffic. So we're actually going in a direction that doesn't support any of our energy or climate goals if we go ahead with that state project. I think in terms of housing, there are a lot of older homes in this community. A lot of them are elderly people live in them. They would like to, they might want or might consider turning those into multi-unit residences, but they don't have the resources. The town could put together a loan and grant program to help with that process, and the sustainability coordinator could help negotiate the variety of different arrangements that people might want to make with in terms of opening their homes up to other people. I think if the town moves forward with a fiber optic internet or telecommunications network, it'll reduce the need for people to drive to the doctor. They can be diagnosed from home. The quality of resolution is extraordinary, and it's widely in use all over the country. That would be one of the many things that people could avoid traveling for if we had a really high resolution internet connection. I think we should continue to do and extend the energy upgrades, and like someone else said, change the energy source for the town buildings. It took I worked for 2 years to get a majority of the select board to agree to support energy audits, and now they're done, and we've done a lot of upgrades in town buildings, and there's plenty to do. It takes an investment and it takes a will to do it, but it's the only thing we can invest in where we actually get a return on that investment. Everything else we just spend. If it's a road, a sidewalk, a boiler, you just spend. But for energy investments, you get a return on it. Also, all done? 30 seconds. Thank you.
2 minutes can go fast sometimes. Oscar.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot to talk about here. As the chair of the Energy Committee, this is a big part of what I think about and what I'm working on during the year. I agree that the new sustainability coordinator is going to be sort of the linchpin for the town's strategy moving forward. It's really great to have him on board. I don't know if he's said his name yet, Stephen Dotson. He started at the beginning of this month. If you have a chance, you should talk to him. He's really sharp. So there's sort of two things. One is what's in the town's direct control. And I would say we've actually done a really good job on municipal operations. The energy audit Elizabeth was talking about, all sorts of other projects. The town's been really receptive. I think we're moving in a great direction. The other half of that is what the town can't so easily touch, and it's the bulk of our fossil fuel use, which is transportation and heating in people's private homes and businesses. And that's a lot harder for the select board to have an effect on. There are a bunch of things we can do, but something I want to talk about really quickly that David touched on is density in terms of development and planning. That's something the town can have an effect on. The more dense you make your town in terms of, apartment buildings instead of lonely houses at the edge of town up on a hill, it's almost a silver bullet. There are so many benefits. It's easier to heat because it's multiple units inside a single building. It's more walkable. Public transit becomes more of an actual option because people are more concentrated. And the climate benefits, you have more open land, which is useful for carbon sequestration, which is useful for growing food. So density is something I want to talk about a lot in this coming year.
And Daniel.
Thank you. This is a really good question, Abby. The part that I heard you mention was about climate justice and about equity. All of my colleagues here have mentioned good practical ideas. When I was, as part of this board in this last year, I voted in favor of the sustainability coordinator and against the climate emergency declaration, which might seem to be contradictory positions, but the sustainability coordinator is a concrete action that we've taken and that will yield results for the town through collaboration, through reviving our energy committee, and through making connections in the community with folks that are directly impacted by climate change. I think that we have a long way to go in this state as a whole in terms of making sure that the impacts of climate change do not fall on the most vulnerable communities. We have a large number of people who are unstably housed in this community. Right now, those people experience climate change impacts today. And so one of the things that this board can do next year and moving forward is to make sure that we end homelessness in Brattleboro.
All right, for our next question, Kate Anderson.
First, I want to thank the Commons and BCTV for the opportunity to ask some questions. And my questions will center on the arts. As a select board member, your leadership will be asked to apply best reasoning to problem solving, fixing, addressing, guiding, and approving various measures to safeguard the already good and to improve what needs improving. You will be an integral part of the governing of this community. Our Brattleboro 2018 town plan states, "The arts are essential, not only in their contribution to our quality of life, but also in their enrichment of our cultural engagement. Arts and cultural experience can play an important role in bridging differences between people." My question to you, think as an artist. think and imagine a Brattleboro that thrives and is dynamic in its use of its resources, people, place, and things. What does that quality of life picture look like?
And then continuing the counterclockwise theme, you're up, Ian.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that. Great. Wow, what a great question. So my fiance, Ruth, is an artist, and I think about art and Brattleboro and how being an artist, how that all exists together. It's one of the reasons that we moved here, because there were so many incredible opportunities and funds available. But as I reflect on what's missing, Ruth and I had to set up a studio in our apartment for her and take up a lot of our space because we couldn't afford anything, any kind of studio space to rent outside of our apartment. And there's a lot of equipment that she uses that we don't own, and there's no way for us to buy it right now. And I think that there's a lot of great work that can be done that isn't because the equipment isn't available. And so I think a cooperative where there is art equipment to be used for free or for a small sum of like a monthly payment would be so cool. And I'm talking about like those like crazy big, she's a fiber artist, so like the giant sewing machine robots. I'm not an artist, obviously, as you can tell. But things like that. And then also how we educate people and how we advertise the funds that we do offer, because I don't think we put it out there enough. And there are a lot of different things, and that would include the this Sunday there is the dinner that I would microloans dinner, and I will be there because she will be there, so you should be there. Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Well, I thank Kate for bringing up the town plan. I played a major role in creating the town plan, and I agree that the arts is a large part of our community, and it's a large part of building community, which is very necessary in our town. We have a vibrant arts community and was recently funded at town meeting and through the select board, and I support that. I also know that they will be giving small grants as well as the museum is. I'm also in favor of the new plan for the museum expansion. I think it will increase school arts education. And I think that the other thing that Kate was involved in was the Arts Atlas, and I think that can be, it's still used and it can be reinvigorated. And I think one thing that the town needs is kind of a generational exchange between older and younger artists, and I think that would create not only more community, but allow the arts institutions to invigorate themselves.
Kurt?
Ms. Anderson, could we all hear the last part of your question?
Sure. Do you need the quote from the town plan or just
No.
the quote? Okay. My question to you is, think as an artist. Imagine Brattleboro that thrives and is dynamic in its use of its resources, people, place, things. What does that quality of life, referenced in the town plan picture, look like?
It is just as deadly as I thought, the question. It leads me to a precipice, a difficulty in my own philosophy, and I am reminded of the rapid transition we made from the questions about the climate emergency to the questions about art, and I would like to bring them together. I studied art as a college student. I've always wanted to be an artist since I was a kid. And now I've pretty much given up my retirement dream, and I wonder about our whole society giving up its dreams, some of its dreams, for the sake of the climate emergency. And so with respect to art, I wonder about completely transforming our concept of art and the way we treat art in the society, transforming it into something that is entirely about the climate. Because I must admit, although I always been an artist and always impressed people as an artist and used to be an artist non-professionally, now I wonder if we can afford the beautiful luxury of art. And I'm quite disturbed at these thoughts that come into me about making this terrible sacrifice. But I think maybe art should be, as our first and essential luxury. In the short term, it's a luxury, and maybe we have to transform it or give it up for the sake of the climate. It's an emergency like that, I think.
David?
Kate, one of the things you didn't mention about arts is the economic importance, and I just wanted to point that out. But when you mentioned lifestyle of being an artist, and what struck me was the peacefulness of it, and the sense of being away from all of these kinds of things, and just really lit up inside, just really feeling alive and alert. And so when I think of that in a municipal context, I think about how do we give other people, everybody, those opportunities. And we have institutions like the youth theater and the music center, the public schools have good art programs, finding ways to expand access to those, make those. The school district also already uses contracts with the youth theater and the music center, and the kids are involved, but to expand that more, to make to more public access, and maybe art classes at night. The museum and the new museum proposal apparently includes a lot of classroom space and open gallery space, or what would you call it, studio space. That's a possibility. The Arts Committee and the Arts Council have grant programs that are publicly funded. It's something that the community has decided to support, and the degree to which it supports it is decided by a town meeting. And so I think of the things that we're doing could all be expanded. But I think the main point is to find ways to, and those are just off the top of my head ideas. I have not thought a lot about this. But I think the key is to find ways to expand opportunities for them, to link it back to Abby's question about who gets to participate and who doesn't, and to expand those opportunities.
Oscar?
So if I allow myself to think as an artist and not as technically, not in terms of policy, what I picture is, I think, a combination of four things. And to go back to your other point, two of them I think we have and we need to protect, and two of them we really need to develop. The two that I think we have are a beautiful setting in the natural world compared to other places I've lived, cities. It's a night and day difference. That's one of the things I see when I look 20 years into the future. Brattleboro needs to never give that up, and it's something that needs to be constantly defended. The other thing that I think we have a good amount of is art. There's a great artistic community here. There's a music scene that is pretty healthy for a town this size. I would like to see more. When I think of an arts town, I picture Northampton with the different colored painted crosswalks and the more visible displays of public art. I would love to see us rise to that level. That's a really appealing image to me. And then the two things that I think are missing, one of them is diversity, which I know is something we think about a lot, but it's still a real problem. It's a problem for Vermont. It's a problem for Brattleboro. And I think we need to find more ways to be welcoming and encouraging for people to move here. I've seen ideas about encouraging international immigration to Vermont that I think are really exciting and would only help our community. And the final piece of the puzzle is that I would like to see us push forward on technology. I would love to see a successful municipal broadband program, but I'd love to see solar panels on more rooftops. I think those, in their own way, in terms of what they mean, are just as beautiful as an art installation. I think technology can be beautiful in that way too. So that's what I see.
Daniel?
Thanks. Thanks for the question, Kate. I'm the husband of an artist and also somebody that works at our museum and art center. And so I have a little bit of insight into what it's like to be an artist in this community. One of the things that I know from young artists is that many of them can't afford to rent studio space here or find a place to live that's affordable for them. They also, struggle to find jobs that pay them enough for them to, have that lifestyle. So I think that, we shouldn't view the arts as a luxury. The arts are essential for us to understand our world, and they're one of the ways in which we critique the world that we currently have and invent new ones. I think we need to have a town where everyone can thrive, that's affordable, and we need to have a town that is not limiting the opportunities for young people here. We've got some demographic challenges. We have some challenges with the developments at Marlborough. Many of the folks from that community are struggling to stay here. I supported the creation of the Town Arts Fund at town meeting, and during my work on the board this year, we were involved in kind of taking a look at the proposals that the Windham County Arts Committee was coming up with, and I think that those people who are intimately involved in the arts in this community are the ones that are best placed to advise on that. I think that the board's role can be, making sure that funds are available, making sure that zoning is done in such a way that we are not, pricing people out, excluding people from being able to live in this wonderful town.
And Rikki?
I want to start with a question to the Commons. I had called and asked for there to be a information reprint about how this is my second year running, and they printed that this is only my first year. Do you know if that was done or not?
That is actually a question for the editors, because that's a decision the editors make, not a report.
They just never got back to me, so I would appreciate your
Oh, I'm
input
sorry about
then.
that.
Yeah, well, it's not your fault, it's their responsibility. So to answer the question then, I think everyone is born an artist, and I want to encourage us all to continue embracing that part of us and never let that go, and ways of doing that are I think through real democracy. Art is expressing ourselves, and we don't have a real democracy here. And so not only should we include 14-year-olds, which is the age when they can start working, but we should give them civil voting classes, like to help them maybe like start like 6th grade elementary school, to encourage them to practice actually voting. And until they become a voting age, what I did propose to the different high schools and elementary schools around here is that they send the select board pictures of what they want government to do, so that their voice is seen and heard here. And the walls here are very white and blank, and we could have a continuing rotating gallery space here, and that would be beautiful.
Okay, and next question to Olga Peters.
Thank you, Randy.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Could I suggest, because I heard a couple of answers from my colleagues that I didn't have even a second to digest. Could we have just like 5 seconds between questions?
We have a lot of candidates up here, and a lot of
Just 5 seconds, there's usually. Yeah, because David said something and I hardly understood it, and then the next question started already. I think it really helps.
Olga. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. In preparing for this forum, I had a conversation with a number of folks from different parts of the community. And it was interesting, in the conversations I had with folks from the business community, they a theme emerged where many of them said, we feel like the town asks a lot of us. The 1% option tax, providing jobs, raising wages, those sorts of things. And yet they didn't always feel like that was reciprocated, that what was asked was not always given back. And so part of the question for you all tonight is, do you see the select board, it's kind of two-part, yes, no, and then answer. Do you see a role for the select board in creating a business positive environment? And if so, what is that role?
And we'll begin with Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you, Olga. There are several things that the Select Board has been and will be focused on in terms of economic development. Number one, we do give small business loans, and I know comes to mind, you know, we recently Duo changed hands, and you know, businesses are changing hands, and we have a role to play in that and encouraging. There's also the new Brattleboro marketing plan, which we just got some feedback. The Select Board did from the Love Brattleboro program that was apparently very successful. I went to the ski jump and was amazed at the crowd. It was really, there are a lot of people coming into town. While the merchants were quite concerned about the 1%, but gosh, I remember Wendy's comment at town meeting as being so spot on, because really people don't make purchasing decisions based on one more penny of tax. And in turn, what the focus of the 1% tax was to offset the increase of the property tax on the middle class. So in terms of keeping a vibrant economic life and having people shop downtown, the 1% helps in a myriad of ways, and it actually is increased the money that we raised from what was anticipated. So there are many things that the town and the select board does to affect the economic climate.
Kurt?
Of course, the select board has a role. I think the role of the select board is grossly misunderstood by the public. The public makes many demands on the select board which do not indicate that they understand, that people understand the laws of the town, the charter. The town charter is your handbook for running a town. I wonder how many people, could we see a show of hands, how many people have read the charter? So when people come to the board and they say, hey, do this for the town, do this for business, do this for the arts community, they're often overlooking the bounds that the select board is supposed to operate under. And I think if the select board does the good job of simply making the town's public services run properly, it creates the kind of environment where people will shop downtown and make a healthy business environment. I mean, particularly, keeping the town clean, that kind of thing is part of the regular day-to-day operations of the town, and that's what the select board is assigned to do. Run the day-to-day operations of the town. If you do that well, it'll work out well for the town businesses.
David?
I think the 1% tax is a good example of something that was very much a great concern for downtown merchants. And it took a long time to convince the community to pass it, and then we passed it, and it's generating revenues better than expected. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. We also increase the requirements for landlords for property inspections. And in both of these things, we didn't really set up any process for seeing what the impact was. And actually, at last night's board meeting, I asked that we follow up with the downtown merchants and find out what's happened with their sales. Are they seeing a downturn? The economy has been somewhat stable through this time. Is it too soon to know? But we need to follow up and see what was the impact. Is the increase in taxes because because they're selling more things, or is it because we're taxing internet sales now? Really, what's happening as a result of that? I believe we did. The town is keeping, or the building inspectors are keeping track of violations to see if the additional inspections have an effect. But one of the things we have to do is make sure that the rules and regulations that we pass are working, that they're getting done what's done. And I was frankly surprised there was pushback about following up with the merchants. I think we also need to look at ways to expand the small business loans that we make and grants. I'm on that committee. We've made a number of grants. A couple of them, unfortunately, people aren't paying back. So we have less than we had thought. We've supported the Downtown Brattleboro Association and Chamber of Commerce promotional efforts. I think we'll certainly continue to do that. I think the day jobs program that we're hoping will be implemented this spring is also going to help, because it's going to get people that need a little help, a lift up. It's going to give them an opportunity to possibly get some additional skills and be employable. So I will stop because Olga says so.
Yeah, I think there's no question that the select board has a role to play in making this a positive place for merchants, and they're obviously a very important part of the economy and the town. Elizabeth mentioned a bunch of the things that are already going on, the community marketing initiative, the revolving loan fund, and general economic development, I know, is always on the mind of the select board when they're making decisions. And I do want to say, though, that I think there's always going to be some degree of tension between taxpayers and taxes. I saw this very clearly with the landlord, the building ordinance issue. That came out to something like $4 a month per unit as extra cost to landlords, and it was still fought against really hard by a pretty determined group of landlords. So I think there always has to be a balance in this regard. Spending has to be paid for. Some of these programs go to people who don't pay a lot of taxes. Some of these programs help people who do pay a lot of taxes. For example, if you own property, you're likely to see much more of a benefit from the spending that the town does for the fire department. I think that's just a truth about how these things work. So I want to recognize that while we do ask a lot of businesses, and it would be possible to ask too much, I think right now the balance is pretty healthy. If there was an opportunity to do another 1% sales tax this year, I would vote against it. I want to give it 5 years and see where we are. But I think on the whole, that was a good decision.
So mostly this week I've been working on this. Make sure the camera can see it. The state of Vermont, that's what I've been working on in my job outside of my select board role. And I think that one of the things that this town can do to have a business-friendly environment is to pay workers livable wages. I think that our...
What's a livable wage?
I'm not going to take questions from my fellow board members, but we can talk about it. I can provide you a report. So we need to have a town that's affordable for folks to live in. We also need to have businesses that can afford to do business here, right? So my natural side is with the workers, and on the board, I've learned that, I can collaborate with the DBA and talk to people about raising the minimum wage on the same day, okay? Because I think that being in this position, you are going to be asked to collaborate with all kinds of people. And I've shown in this year on the board that I'm capable of doing that, even though sometimes it's not naturally where I'll find myself.
Rikki?
Representatives who are advocating for less than $25 an hour minimum wage starting wage are not your friends. The $15 minimum wage is offensive to recommend to people. People are not going to be empowered by that and able to meet their needs. I am against raising taxes and interest rates on loans. I voted against raising the 1% sales tax because I do disagree with how the money is being spent, and I think that even though I'm totally against the entire system of taxes, what we can do is at least give the people who are being taxed enable them to vote on how their money is being spent, and not just have representatives vote for that once a year, but that should be public domain to vote on. The charter was spoken about earlier, and that's very out of date and needs to be updated. Time.
Ian?
Can I get the end of the question read back?
Sure. So it was kind of a two-part.
Yep.
One, do you see the select board having a role in creating a business positive environment? And if you do, what is that role?
Yeah.
I'd like
So-
to take some of my time back if I have 30 seconds to add. Thank you. So I think we should also decolonize Brattleboro by reclaiming Montescok of the Sokoke St. Francis band as being part of the larger Sokoke County of the Nation of the Missisquoi of the Abenaki Confederacy. And I've been in touch with their council members asking them to become involved with that recognition that has been denied both state and federally. It was approved once, but then rescinded in the 70s because hunters and fishermen complained that they had special hunting rights.
Yep. So yes, absolutely yes. I think the select board does have that role. I grew up in Vermont. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of other towns that do not have the type of small business growth and energy that Brattleboro does. I think we need to promote it and support it. I was in favor of the 1% local option tax. I would agree with Oscar. I wouldn't want to do it again next year. I want to see where it goes, but I think it's obviously been good for the town. I think that we have some good programs that are in the works currently. The youth services pilot jobs program this spring, I'm really excited to see where that goes. But I'll use this my time to sort of touch on on one issue particularly, which I think shows where the select board can work on an issue that trickles down and affects everything. So the municipal broadband, I think it's so important for Brattleboro to make itself competitive as a town in Vermont and as a place for younger people to come and live. And that will help small businesses, that will help the business community, it will help underserved populations in Brattleboro. And I would encourage everyone to take the survey that just came out, and you can go to windhamregional.org/broadband. I've already taken it, and you should take it too. So, thank you.
Elizabeth?
Olga, could you repeat the question?
Sure.
Didn't I answer this?
No, that's it. No, Kurt started it.
I could say it again.
Okay. And now that we have the questions out of the way from the panel, now it's time for the audience to weigh in.
Randy, may I ask
Yes?
one more question before we go to, because I think it's a reporter's question that needs to be asked.
Okay. Report.
This is the reporter's question. If you are elected, have each of you looked at any conflicts of interest you might have, any other boards that you're serving on, that could either take your commitment away from the select board or be a conflict of interest with the work you do on the select board?
And we'll start with Kurt.
I am a member of Brattleboro Common Sense. Brattleboro Common Sense mission is to advance the voice of Brattleboro in the community of everyone outside Brattleboro. Our mission is to, if I can remember the exact words, increase public participation in town governance and to expand and amplify the voice of Brattleboro outside. So our mission is directly and specifically about Brattleboro and with Brattleboro's interests in mind. And I haven't received a penny of compensation anyway, so I think the matter of conflict of interest is dismissed with that detail. Today I spoke with the governor and the commissioner of the Secretary of Transportation in an attempt to advance our interests in and influence about the 3 traffic circles that are proposed, and about climate change, and a favorable new tax program that we've been researching. So BCS and my connection to it will have no conflict with my work on the board.
David?
I think, Olga, what you're asking is more conflict of duty than conflict of interest, and I don't think anybody's got a fiscal, maybe they do, I shouldn't say that, but what I'm going to respond to is conflict of duty. I am on the school board as well, and I have been on the school board for, I think, 11 years, and on this board for 7, and I've never had a situation where there was a conflict of interest. There's never been a conflict of duty. And when I first ran, a lot of people asked at that time, Annette Cappy, the town clerk, can somebody be on both boards? And the answer is yes. They're separate municipalities, they're entirely separate funding mechanisms, and the taxing authority is separate. So there is no conflict. The policies and the governance duties are completely different. And in fact, the overlap has actually been helpful, because in one really specific way, there are a number of them, but the most obvious one is that we now purchase our fuel oil collectively with the school district, so we purchase a greater amount and we get a reduced rate because of that. So it's really provided opportunity for synergies rather than conflicts.
Oscar?
Yes, I would have to resign from the Energy Committee, which is sad, but after about a year, we finally got the committee back up to full strength. I'm confident they would find a 7th member quickly, and it would continue to operate very smoothly. And I don't know if I would have to, but I would probably step down from the Finance Committee, since it wouldn't really make any sense for me to be analyzing and providing oversight on a budget that I was creating. I mean, it would make it easier. And then I guess I wouldn't bid on the job if the town decided to make a new website. That would be a financial.
Daniel?
I don't think I have any conflicts of interest. I work for Sevca part-time as a crisis fuel worker. So town meeting gives money to Sevca. When I was a town meeting member, I don't know. I don't think that's a conflict. I also work for Vermont Interfaith Action as a community organizer. If we were organizing on something that directly targeted the Brattleboro Selectboard, that would be a problem. So my interesting story. My boss is a state senator in Chittenden County. So she does not work on state policy through our organization, because it would be, the lines would get a little blurred. So yeah, I do the same here. It's a little smaller. I don't know. I guess that's about it. Oh, I also am the board president of the community radio station that is currently airing this, because I asked them to. But not because I wanted my voice heard. I wanted as many people as possible to hear all of these voices. So.
frequency is that?
107.7 FM. Also streaming at wvew.org.
And your show is 6 to 8 Thursday night.
6 to 8 Thursday night. Yes, brand spanking new.
Okay,
That's about it.
Rikki?
The only conflict I can see is that if I'm elected to all the different term positions I was nominated for, then I would have to resign. And also, I'm totally accepting write-ins for District 2, 2-year term representative as well. I would have taken the opportunity to collect all of the nomination signatures for it if I had known at the time that it was opened, or it had opened after someone had resigned. But yeah, and I can be pretty transparent about how if I am elected to all of them, I would be committed to taking the 3-year select board seat.
Ian?
Yeah, this is my language. The legal field is full of conflict checks. Yeah, I'm on the board of civil authority as a justice of the peace. I don't think I've married anybody here, but maybe. And I talked to Hillary, and I would not have to resign from that, even though the select board members are also on the board of civil authority. I would take 2 seats, but I probably wouldn't resign because I really, really, really like marrying people. And then I'm the alternate on the developmental review board, and I don't think that would be a conflict either, but that one I haven't talked to Hillary about. The more confusing one would be with my legal work. If my firm were to be involved in anything, that would be a little bit more complicated, but that would have to be a case by case.
Elizabeth?
I was very happy when I was elected to the select board last year, and I got to resign as chair of the planning commission, as a member of the finance committee, as a Wyndham regional commissioner, and a member of the skate park committee. And I resigned those knowing that I had done good contributing work on all of them. So I'm happy to concentrate all my efforts as a select board member, and I couldn't imagine dividing my time in that way. And I'm devoting my public service to the select board.
Now it's time for the public. And using the moderator's prerogative, and also because I noticed that she's got some questions ready, I'll let my former colleague Wendy Levy have the first question from the audience. Anyone else who wants to follow, just line up behind her.
Thanks, Rikki. Hi there, I'm Wendy Levy. I live in District 1. This question is for all of the candidates. If you could make only one change to the proposed FY21 budget, what would it be?
We'll begin with David.
Wow, that's a great question.
I have more.
Just kidding. Can I take 2 minutes to think about it?
No.
I definitely want to think about what would be the primary thing. I think,
Well, isn't only 5% of it going to human services?
Will you take this thing?
While you're targeting, we'll let Oscar take a swing at it.
no, I'm kind of ready. I think I would expand the budget for the human resources and the sustainability coordinator. I think the 2 major issues that the town faces are lack of diversity in the workforce, and the other is housing. And I think the sustainability coordinator, as he begins his work and researches the needs and finds out what really is keeping Brattleboro from being sustainable for many of the residents, is lack of affordable housing. So I would want there to be adequate resources to research that and start to develop solutions.
Well, I feel kind of lucky because I've spent the last 2 months basically going over the budget line by line with the finance committee. I still don't really have a good answer. I know that there was nothing in the expenditures that stood out as something I definitely wanted to cut. So I think if I could choose, it would probably, From the conversations I've had, I think I would increase the funding for the Arts Fund. They've gotten a ton of applications. I think there's huge potential for, like I was talking about before, for a greater presence of art and supporting the artistic community in Brattleboro to be something that ripples out in a way that draws people in, that isn't just money that's going to support artists and provide art for us to look at as members of the community, but it's also something that has this larger effect. But really, I don't think I would cut or add anything.
Daniel?
Let's see. So we worked on the budget over 10 meetings, I think. It was a long haul. It was my first time doing it. I'm glad to have done it, and I hope to do it again next year if re-elected. The answer to this question is actually one that we already did make a change on. It was the non-union pay equity review, where we made a decision to compensate town staff who are not part of unions using a step system that took into account the complexity of their job, the responsibility that they have. And if I don't get re-elected, I'm going to be really happy that I did that work this year, and I can rest easy knowing that I had an impact on the people of our town that's going to benefit our town as well, because when workers have more money in their back pockets, it's good for our local economy. Quick answer to the actual question though, Project CARE is a really great partnership between the police department and numerous organizations that are helping people with a harm reduction focus getting into treatment when they're ready for it. We funded it for $16,000 this year, and we increased the pay from the proposed 12, whatever it was, to $15 an hour for the recovery coaches. If you think about the work that a recovery coach is doing when they're meeting with somebody that has recently overdosed, I think that if this program proves to be effective, we can consider looking at that again and seeing whether or not $15 for that hour's worth of work is an adequate remuneration. I can never say that word.
Rikki?
So, did I hear you correctly that you said...
One budget item.
Please let me finish. I was trying to say, did I hear you correctly, Daniel, when you were saying that you were proud of raising the wage for non-union members?
Yes.
Well, then my one line would be to have equal wage of the union members.
Yeah, Daniel, you did 2. You stole mine. What's that about? Yeah, it's Project CARE. I think the 16,000 was, as I understand it, kind of the minimal, like the amount they sort of need to get it started. I think it's such a great program, and it's the type of fiscal spending that I can really get behind. It's investing in our future. It's investing in issues that are directly impacting a lot of people, and I think I would have liked to have seen it be a little higher.
Elizabeth?
Well, of course I agree with Daniel that the overall thrust of our work on the budget this year was fair pay, both union and non-union, and so I wouldn't change that. I'm very happy with that outcome. Another possibility for change is to allow for a reduction in taxes, again, because a benefit of lower taxes is a boon to the overall economy. I'm also very pleased with the day labor program, but I think it's a toss-up between Project CARE and Human Services, because the opioid crisis and the homelessness in Brattleboro is a concern to us all. It's something that requires a community focus, and both of those items benefit from the fact that the town's goal is to leverage working with nonprofits to have a cost-effective way to really have solutions for the people in our town that are different from the day-to-day operations of the town. This consortium, and Project CARE is a perfect example, is a way that we can all collaborate on a town crisis with a moderate expense.
And Kurt.
I'm disappointed that the budget does not have any new provisions relevant to climate change and the emergency. The board has not taken the emergency seriously in the past year. There have been no proposals. The sustainability coordinator was started under different names by Schoon Agave, who is one of our directors, especially by Tim Stevenson as the director of Post Oil 10 years ago. And it was brought by petition by Brattleboro Common Sense to the town last March. But there was an opportunity to do something in the budget and nothing materialized. So I think we should begin to seriously fund an emergency preparedness fund. And we could do that perhaps by cutting the, you want one item? The fire engine. That's $500,000. That ought to go to emergency preparedness.
Say it does.
Any clarification, was the question, Olga, what would we, or what would,
Wendy.
oh, Wendy, sorry. Was it, what would we add to the budget?
No.
Oh, because I was talking about,
Change.
oh, the change would be to add, was what I said I would
Magical
change it
revenue
to
line would be
expand human services.
Sure.
And, yeah, great.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Robin Flatley. I've lived in Brattleboro since 1992, and my concern is 5G. I believe that 5G should be in the climate change concerns because the energy coming from small cell arrays is 24/7. It's not something that is going to be happening only a certain portion of time. So if we have it as Wi-Fi just floating through the air, it's going to desiccate all the bugs. It's going to do really powerful things that you may not think are important. But once it starts happening, it's going to be very important. So I'm hoping that we will consider 5G, and I'd love to know where you all will stand. Now, I also know that the person standing behind me wants to talk about 5G, and she's got a baby in her arms. And so I know time is sensitive, so I would like her to come forward with her consent.
It is somewhat bonded with your question, I guess. Hi, my name's Nikki. My husband and I, along with our 2 small children, just moved here from Boston 2 years ago. When I tell locals just that, a lot of people look shocked and they want to know why I came here. I recognize now that what this community needs is more young families to move here like myself. So maybe I have a little insight. I can say the number one thing that caught my eye when I was researching different areas was the healthy living and general lifestyle. The air even feels cleaner than where I came from. So while break-ins and the drug problems are relatively small town feel like are very big issues, coming from Boston, I know that these issues are everywhere, and all we can do about this is really work together and come together on that. What really concerns me is the 5G implementation with lack of evidence for safety. I was hoping that this would be exactly the type of thing that Brattleboro and Vermont in general would hold off on, especially with mounting concerns for a lack of health and safety testing. And instead we now have a new 5G going in right next to the elementary school right down the street from my house. I can brag to my young friends and all my followers about the amazing access to farm fresh food, farmers market, amazing community, and network for moms, but I think that this general lack of concern for implementation of 5G will set us back significantly in our ability to get more young families to move out here. Nothing made me move on to the next area when I was looking at houses like this kind of old way of thinking, not acknowledging that new technologies need to higher safety standards, proper due diligence. We need to protect our air and water, but with new technologies coming our way, we also need to recognize that there's more to protect here. We need to maintain our personal right to opt out. I love Brattleboro. I really want to stay. I want to continue to grow our family and have our roots be here. But this 5G is so close to my house, close to my family that I moved here to protect. So I want to know, how will you protect our rights? And exactly where do you stand on 5G? Sorry, it was a little long.
Okay. Oscar?
Thanks, Robin and Nikki. So I am a layperson on this issue. I have done what I think is the responsible thing to do, which is do my research, take it seriously, and apply the best thinking I'm capable of to it. And after doing that, the conclusion I've reached is that I don't see evidence that 5G is a significant danger. There are studies that say it is. There are studies that say it isn't. The ones that say it is a danger mostly focus on evidence of secondary effects like increased surface skin temperature and oxidative damage to cells, which are all things that sound very frightening, may be very frightening, and may lead to secondary health concerns, for sure. But with every technology, with everything we do, come dangers. The car exhaust you breathe in, the processed food you eat, the unprocessed food you eat, regular Wi-Fi, power lines, there is always some downside. And I think that based on the best work I can do on the subject, I don't think that this rises to the level of a serious danger. And for that reason, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but, well, I wouldn't be happy, but but yeah, that's where I stand right now. I don't think it's significantly dangerous, and I don't oppose it. And I also think that these new technologies are often very important for moving forward economically, in terms of equity, in terms of access to information. So that's where I stand right now.
So during my year on the select board, we've had a number of comments about the rollout of 5G wireless technology, specifically in Brattleboro. I mean, this is a thing that's happening all over the globe. One of the ways that I've tried to conduct myself on this board is serious, thoughtful, and hardworking. And those of you that know me and those of you that worked alongside me, I think would agree that that's how I have conducted myself. When it came to 5G, I met with a couple of people that were concerned about potential health impacts. I listened to what they had to say. I read the material that they provided for me. I, like Oscar, did my own research. And you know, I think one of the challenging things about living in this moment is that we have a great deal of information at our fingertips. We can go online and search for whatever we want. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate between what is reliable and what's not reliable. To the best of my ability, I've done that research. I've looked in places where I believe there is credible information to be found. And it does not seem to me that there is a significant health risk that the Brattleboro Selectboard should be stepping in to take action on. Furthermore, this is sort of one of the, I think we often have these sort of global concerns coming to us here. And where else should they go? We're your local representatives on this level, so that's fine. But the Brattleboro Selectboard, doesn't have a whole lot of levers it can pull in terms of, preventing a rollout of this wireless technology. And if I'm re-elected, I'll keep an open mind. But right now, it's not something I'm concerned about. I'm more concerned about homelessness, addiction, affordable housing, etc.
Rikki?
So I stand by my original answer to this last year's election debate that even though since then I have been networking with more 5G scientists to see if I can try to understand all of the technology more. And I don't think we should be experimented on, and we should enable the public to vote on what boundaries they want to set around themselves. If I think what we can be responsible for is writing legislation that, from what we're hearing people say, that they do and don't want, and then they can vote on what boundaries they want around it, and then make plans according to that. I would personally vote against having 5G near me or around me.
Ian?
Yeah, so I think I'll just come out and say I support 5G. I really appreciate what your opinion is and where you're coming from. I think every new technology needs to have a check. We can't just be implementing just the next new big thing. It needs to be thoroughly thought about, researched, and then implemented if it's the right thing for our community and for our citizens. I've done as much research as another layman in this field, and I don't see the research that says that it's dangerous in the way that would make me want to vote against it. But I think being part of the board means keeping an open mind, and also being a active and engaged citizen is to continue to bring the issue up and to continue to engage it as more research comes out. But at the moment, from the research I've done, I support it.
Elizabeth?
Well, Robin has submitted some information for me that I haven't had a chance to read yet. The research on 5G that I've done intimated that it was that the poor health effects were another instance of Russian propaganda that wanted the United States to not have the benefits of this technology. And the thing that concerns me is that what we have both locally and nationally is such mistrust of our government that we're not able to decipher what's real health information and what isn't. And I remember the controversy about electromagnetic fields, that people just didn't believe that the National Institutes of Health said that it was safe. So I think, that makes it that much more difficult to come to a consensus. What we have in Brattleboro and what the Select Board has done is join this communication union district for broadband. And I'm not, I will continue to research the 5G issue, but I'm not really that sure what the Select Board's role is. I mean, we don't get to have an up or down vote on what constitutes, a 5G coming next door. So while we may have concerns, while we may be able to understand and read about various factions, I think, when we come to a decision about it, what our ultimate role is, it's not clear to me.
Kurt?
Thank you for the question, Nikki. Thank you for the question, Ms. Flatley. I've been approached by a number of local residents, as I am with Brattleboro Common Sense, and as I mentioned, it's our charter. It's in our charter to promote people's engagement in the issues in governance. I appreciate Ian's moderate skepticism, and I appreciate Rikki's strong skepticism of science. I think it's important to note that science has not always been right. The scientific community was silent for decades while people got cancer from smoking cigarettes. The scientific community was silent since 1922. People don't know, in 1922, Europe and Japan outlawed lead paint. But lead paint continued to be used in residential applications in the United States until the late 70s. So 50 years, for 50 years, the scientific community was allowing people, children in the United States, to eat lead paint and get brain damage. That being said, one of my directors, Tim Maciel, has reviewed the literature about the safety of 5G and found that the American Cancer Society the World Health Organization and 30 other health organizations that he trusts feel there is no health risk. But because so many people are concerned about it, I think it is the duty of the select board to promote a resolution, a town vote. Anybody who wishes to collaborate with Brattleboro Common Sense, if I am not on the select board, I would stop.
There's, as others have said, there's credible research that that indicates that there is cause for concern, and there's credible research that indicates that there is no cause for concern. There are studies underway right now that are intended to answer that question, and I would support a moratorium until that research is done. I don't share Kurt's blanket dismissal of science. I actually believe in science. I think it's, well, I won't go too far on that one. The reason that we continue to use lead paint and lead gas and all those other things is political and greed. It's not science. But the bigger question around 5G is, why do we want it? It's an inferior technology compared to fiber. It's slower. It's less reliable. It's never going to get to anything beyond the most intensely populated part of town, and it's going to cost a lot more money. We're not even working on it as a town. We're working on a fiber network. We're working with other towns in the county on a fiber network. You're comparing the speed of radio waves with the speed of light. And I'm not going to come up with mules compared to rocket ships analogy, because it's way beyond that. It's the difference between a 2-inch pipe and a 15-mile river as far as the amount of data that can be conveyed on fiber compared to cable. And 5G it holds out a lot of promise, or there's a lot of promotion going on, and it will definitely be faster, but it won't be anywhere near as reliable or as fast as fiber, and it won't be anywhere near as valuable to the community. So I don't think that there's anything much. Well, there are some towers going in around town, and the state is not about to, doesn't seem like they're going to take any action unless there's a large groundswell. So I think people with concerns should get together and make sure the legislature hears about that. But in the meantime, we need to be working toward fiber.
Okay, since this is a 90-minute program and we're getting perilously close to the end, regrettably, you're going to have to save your questions for after the meeting, for if you're still standing there. And now it's time for the closing argument.
I'd rather hear their questions than hear about the closing.
You okay?
Yeah.
Do you wish to waive the closing question? Okay, yeah. Mr. Cravel, you were in line, but
Yeah, sure.
Then this will be the last question of the night.
Oh, George, make it good.
No pressure.
Actually, my question was just for one candidate, so I will sit down and let somebody ask a more broad
Okay.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank Common Sense and BCTV for this opportunity, and thank you all for being here. And I wanted to point out what Kurt said at the beginning of the program about the urgency universally of our environment and the priority it needs to be. And I believe it starts at home. And a positive experience this last year was the tire cleanup. And I was the main person who spearheaded it. And I won't go into detail, but it took me at least almost 2 years to get it activated, because I went to the town employees, I went to the select board, and it was really hard to motivate people. But thanks to BCTV, Russ and Maria, and the Brattleboro Reformer, Bob Audette, Chris, this wonderful young man who had an aerial camera, it was brought to the public attention, and we got huge support. And finally, the Connecticut River Conservancy, which I had been emailing for over a year, finally appeared at the town plan office, whom I also had been courting for over a year. And presto, these other organizations came out in force, and it turned out to be a very positive experience. But the thing is with small towns, what I found is often the town fathers, the town employees were more concerned about protecting the businesses and owners. Understandably, they're a huge part of the tax base. And also, they're often very proactive members of the community, and I understand that. But on that note, I do not think they should be exempt about being conscientious of polluting. And after the tire cleanup, I thought, well, good, the worst is over. And hopefully
Question?
this can be an easier process.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
Pardon me?
Is there a question in there somewhere?
Yes. There's also a lot of dumping on the businesses along Putney Road behind the embankment, which goes down to where these wetlands are. And I had brought it to the attention of the town. And once again, it was like hitting a brick wall. And what within the context of the select board could we do with regulations, fines, something to enforce and encourage? I would think it would encourage new businesses because people are becoming a lot more conscientious about that. But would you, as a board member, each and every one of you, be interested within the board and within the charter to find ways to regulate and encourage businesses to be conscientious of their waste and not just dump them under embankments like the businesses along Putney Road are still doing? Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question, Terry. I remember helping you navigate some of that stuff with planning, and polluters should pay. It's pretty simple. You know, that's one of the problems with the way that environmental regulation has worked in this country. The polluters do not pay, and therefore it is not, in their best interest to stop polluting. Here in Brattleboro, we do enforce regulations about environmental conservation, and as you know, the real work of what the planning department do, what Sue and Brian and now Andrew do with that is a lot about relationships, because we live in a small town, and so we work together to make sure that we have the best quality of life for everybody that we can. I think you've seen that in good evidence with the health order that we took out against a rental property, well, 2 rental properties here in town, and they're continuing to collaborate with those folks to make sure that the people that are most impacted by unsafe and unhealthy conditions are able to have a good quality of life.
Well, I really feel empathy with the struggle of having priorities and not seeing them being taken seriously by the government. And I have been, for the last 2 years, trying to get municipal water testing and filtration requirement upgrades, because right now there's really no enforcement of that. And I am still looking for help with that. And I don't believe in allowing businesses to pollute for money. I mean, they should be charged what is the cost to prevent them from polluting and having an efficient system. Absolutely. And I've walked back there, and I've seen the amount of litter that happens there, and just overall would help with maintaining the litter throughout the areas. We need to have more recycle and trash cans, and because most of the canisters are chained up right now, and also we need to have dog waste bags out available to people, so we don't so that we give them the supplies to be responsible.
Is this our last?
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to thank BCTV, our great panel. This has been just a really wonderful debate. I've really appreciated the opportunity to be here. To the question, so first, yeah, I think polluters should be punished. I think that the town has the means to do that. We have the laws to do that. I can speak on this issue mostly from my experience on the Developmental Review Board, where I work a lot with Brian and Andrew and Sue. They're really passionate and smart and engaged people. I've learned so much from them. And one of the things that we try to do on that board, which is like for new construction, is to keep the heart of our town's plan and our town's mission in what we allow to be done. And I think we really believe in a clean, healthy and clean town and a state. That's one of the reasons I'm so proud to be a Vermonter and to be from this state. So I think it's continuing to do that, and it's continuing to keep that in our hearts when we're on the board, on the select board, that can help to fulfill that mission.
Yes, Terry, I was out in the field with you, and it's a very interesting problem. One of the things that's the most interesting is there were different property rights. I mean, we didn't own that property, so whether we had the right to go out and clean up, that was one of the sticking points, because the owner of the property seemed reluctant to have action taken. So I think, that was one problem that we had to overcome, and that was a big one, because, this country's based on property rights, and their property is polluted. They don't want to do anything about it. That's a tricky business. However, I do know that the planning department, Sue and Brian and Andrew, we have a considerable amount of brownfield money from the federal government, EPA grants, and we've gone around to many properties to have the cleanup requirements assessed. And that turns out to be a big economic development boon for the town, because these properties that would have been stuck in limbo can be redeveloped, because the state provides funding and the federal government through the town administration to have jumpstart the cleanup of polluted properties in town. So that's a great thing, and again, it comes down to jurisdiction, and I applaud you for bringing that to the town's attention. And I think that, we can all continue to work together as a community to identify places that need cleanup, find the right jurisdiction to clean them up, and work together.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, thank you for that. I think it is really a matter of jurisdiction, Terry. And I understand that the state laws regarding pollution of waterways give all the control to the state. So the way of addressing it is not by addressing the polluting per se, but by getting upstream of the issue a bit. There has been recently in the state legislature legislation for a statewide ban on plastic bags. The plastic bag ban was actually started here in Brattleboro by my director, Tim Mayseal, and it went statewide very quickly. Part of that initiative is the suggestion from the committee that governed it is a principle called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Manufacturers of goods are supposed to now keep ownership of them. So if you produce rubber or a tire, that's your tire. You have to be responsible for that tire coming all the way around. I think something like that might assist in the very thorough initiative which Elizabeth has suggested.
I don't know if we're going to get cut off or not, so I just want to say, I can't speak for the others here, but I'm happy to stay. If we want to retain this format, I'm happy to stay after the broadcast and continue to answer questions. If people that want to leave could leave so that we could have a quiet room where we could continue, that would be great. I think what your question was, Terry, was why did it take 2 years? Why does it take so long? Why is it so hard for a citizen to get response? And I think the answer to that is because it's competing with all the other things that the town asks of the public services and police. But the only way that we have the regulations for probably pretty much everything you've seen or everything you spoke about. The problem is finding out about it and then being able to act. And that requires people like you and citizens to report things that the police or public works aren't necessarily going to see.
Could I briefly clarify? Yeah. I think there could be more moral support within the employees of the town when a private citizen like myself, they have the maps, they have a lot of information they could share to help someone like me do the footwork. And I don't, you know, I respect these people and I like them, but there was some attitude that I felt they could have been a lot more supportive and informational.
So I agree with, I think, everyone else that polluters should pay for the damage they do. I think that's, in terms of jurisdiction, private property, that's kind of the theme of environmentalism in general, is that someone may pollute their own property, but that will have widespread consequences for people and for things not on the property. And it's about making sure that those costs are identified and paid for by the people who cause them. So I think it is important, and we do need to look for solutions, even for things that are happening on people's private property, et cetera. The other half of the question about access and about the reception you got, I just want to say that one of the big roles of the sustainability coordinator is going to be to act as sort of a touchstone between members of the public and town staff. Stephen will know his way around departments. He'll already have these relationships. And one of his primary tasks is going to be soliciting feedback from the community and also being there as a resource. So if you come to him, he'll know who to talk to. He will have the access that someone right off the street might have to wait way too long to get. So hopefully going forward, he can serve as a resource and avoid this happening again.
That would be great. Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Action-packed night, lots of thoughts. So we'll put an end to the proceedings here and remind people that voting takes place on Tuesday, March 3rd, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the American Legion on Linden Street. For early voting, you can do that at the town clerk's office between 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m., Monday through Friday through March 2nd. And please vote. And thank you, and good evening to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.